Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Caverns of Thracia preview show. I'm Joseph Goodman, publisher at Goodman Games, and I'm going to pass the baton to Michael Curtis to introduce himself.
And that would make me Michael Curtis because now I have a baton. I am the director of product development for the DCC side of the Caverns of Thracia and various other stuff. But we're only here to speak of things of Grecian origin. And I'm going to pass this baton, or perhaps I will pass the torch, the Olympic torch, to go along with that Grecian theme to my my comrade on the other side of the Grecian wall, Mr. Chris Doyle.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris. I am the director of development, 5e development and design on Caverns of Thracia. Yes, and I didn't really do a whole lot on this one, so I'm really excited to talk about the other folks that are with us that are going to tell us all about the conversion and the conversion process. I will pass the baton to my virtual left, which is Scott Moore.
Hi all, I'm Scott Moore. I'm one of the writers on this project. I worked on the conversion to the 5e rule set, as well as had the chance to develop some Thracia-related new material to go along with it. And my counterpart on the DCC side, Mr. Bob Brinkman.
Hey everybody, I am, as Scott said, Bob Brinkman. I am the person that was responsible for the DCC conversion of Caverns of Thracia. Worked on some bonus material. This is just part of a Olympic marathon of conversions, right? Devil Lich, Dark Tower, and Caverns of Thracia. It's just go, go, go. I love it.
The trifecta.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, everybody, the agenda for the show is to tell you about Caverns of Thracia. There hasn't been a version published since, I think, AD&D, right? I believe the last published version was whatever it was, the rule set from 40 years ago. So we're going to be the first person, I think, in recent memory to update it to a modern rule set. We did a reprint of the classic a while back, but we're going to have a 5e edition, 2016. Okay, it was the last reprint, and even that was the 1E rules. So we're going to update it to 5e and DCC stats, so which is very exciting. The crowdfunding actually launches less than a week from now, next Tuesday, if I remember correctly. So what we wanted to talk about in this show is to tell you, first of all, why we're bringing this back. Why are we going to republish a 40-year-old adventure? What makes it special in the first place? And a lot of things, but we'll tell you that in a sec. And then give you a preview of the crowdfunding page as it stands now. So you can sort of go in knowing how to get the best deal, where the pledge levels are. Some of the other items we're offering, you can see one of them behind me, Beneath the Isle of Serpents, is a DCC adventure that Mr. Bob here wrote. And that's what we're going to talk about. And we can see your chat there. Anybody wants to jump in, feel free to jump in if we're not covering something, or if there's something you wanted us to make sure to talk about, steer us along as we go. So Caverns of Thracia is a classic mega dungeon. I want to say it's over 250 encounters, if I remember correctly, 6 huge dungeon levels. And actually, why don't I turn over to whoever wants to jump in? Tell us what makes Caverns of Thracia special. What made this adventure such a hit back in the day, and why are people still running games of it at GaryCon as of this year? It's still being actively played.
Caverns of Thracia has everything that we currently expect in a great module in one module. It has multiple routes through. It has memorable NPCs, challenging encounters, devilish traps, and most fascinating for me is a backstory that you get a little bit in text and then you get to discover the rest through play. So you don't get text bombs with things to memorize so much as you experience it as you go. And that's a game changer. That really makes this module stand head and shoulders above everything else.
Yeah, I'll just throw in, it's kind of it's a classic mega dungeon. There are 4 dungeon levels, and then there's also level 3A, which is kind of like it's kind of a full dungeon level. And then I don't know, maybe we even added more of that. You never know if we hit certain stretch goals. But what I love about it is it's not samey, like it's different, that there's different characterizations for each of the levels. So unlike certain classic adventures, which will not be named here, that tend to be just, here's more orcs, here's more goblins, here's another level, it's same. You've got a variety of environments, and as Bob alluded to, you've got lots of ins and outs, which is a classic design. So it's just, I love it. And it's just, it's got a lot of different things to really kind of keep you on your toes and keep your party interested and engaged. So
I'll play off of Chris's comments a little bit as well. In addition to being one of the early mega dungeons, it's not your standard enter the dungeon, kill all the monsters, and come out the other end. There are many factions within the caverns that are not friendly to one another, and different factions control different levels or different sections of levels. So for those of you who enjoy combat, there's plenty of opportunity for that. For those of you who enjoy social interaction and exploration, there are groups that you may say, hey, they don't like this other group as well. Maybe there's a chance we can ally with this group, and maybe everything I encounter in here isn't just something I'm supposed to fight. There might be a more intelligent way to go through this adventure. But if you just want to fight monsters, yeah, there's plenty of opportunity for that as well.
I will say also, it's also one of the first dungeons ever in the history of them, which is actually it has 1 foot set in history. It's a historical influence. I mean, which was odd for the time. You know, we see much more of it now, but it used to be everything was like inspired by Tolkien or something like this. But if I mean, the monsters are Greek in origin, the names are Greek, I mean, so you look at this and you're not forced to put into some sort of imaginative space. You already have a background. I mean, most of us have covered Greek mythology growing up, so a lot of this will be familiar, and that's an extra kind of arrow in the game master's quiver, who's just like, oh, I don't quite know how a Myrmidon would react to this situation. It's like, oh well, maybe I do, or like what's a Gorgon going to do? Probably nothing nasty to you, maybe turn you to stone or something. It's interesting, kind of set the tone for that as well for going forward.
You guys are touching on all the great spots. One thing I'm going to add, which I think Scott you all kind of mentioned, is like the layered history. The fact that the dungeon has a backstory. You hear about dungeon ecology. How can this monster live here if it has nothing to eat? But this dungeon actually has like a true history to it, and the different factions that occupied it, improved it, modified it, then were wiped out by the next faction who occupied it, improved it, modified it, then were wiped out by the next faction. Then those guys came back. Like there's a real history and story to it that you can discover by playing through it. And it's really a I don't know, a legend you have to live through or play through, as Bob mentioned, to fully understand. And you guys, correct my memory, it was the lizard folk who built it, right? And then I think the beastmen moved in, then the humans kicked them out. Then remind me.
If I remember correctly, it was a scaly beginning. The was that in it, and then I believe the humans kind of chased them out, but I think the humans had kind of bestial servant slave class.
That's right. Then they revolted and they took over. That's right. Yes. Right.
And that kind of brings us to the current state, because it's very furry friendly down there. I mean, you got a lot of people with hair, running things, and of course there's still some scaly people around, and there's still some some humanoids, and some of them have been around for maybe longer than they should have. There's there might be a certain freeze dry in somebody that you can defrost, and they might have some pertinent information to you. So you can communicate with all manner of the history of the Caverns of Thracia by the time you get through it, if you're lucky.
Actually, Mike, let's just say it's okay to share secrets on this show. So if you're a player who's going to run through this adventure, sign off now. But we will perhaps reveal some secrets, because Mike's hinting heavily at something that I think is cool about the adventure that we should talk about, and there's other cool things that we should talk about, and we're just going to have to reveal it. And Mike, on that note, do you want to tell us more about the freeze specimen you're alluding to, and how cool it is?
So one of the interesting things about Caverns of Thracia, as we talked, is that there's this history to it. So there's language issues, because there's some of the kind of the descendants of the original people who are down there, and they speak a much older version of the kind of an evolved language. So you have to learn to speak with them, which can be done with either spells or just kind of maybe some intelligence checks or some just role playing. But there are a couple people. There are some legacies. Let's just say, one of which happens to be somebody who was around when the original Caverns of Thracia went down, but then got caught in a room that was like really, really cold. It basically went into suspended animation, a la Buck Rogers in the 25th century. And one of the things you can do is you can defrost them, maybe on purpose, maybe accidentally, and then they become a way, if you can establish communication with them, they can speak the native language. So, they can interact with you, all the other humans and some of the other, factions that are down there, allowing you to speak with them. And then that opens up avenues that wouldn't be open to you if you had gone down there with the express purpose of murderizing everybody you run across. So,
Bob, tell us about your favorite encounters.
Yeah, I think the combat encounters and the traps are great, but I love some of the encounters you can have with NPCs. If we're going to spell secrets, there is a bridge keeper who is a giant gnome. And I'm going to say that again. He's a giant gnome.
Like the jumbo shrimp.
Yes, and he has become like my campaign playtesters. That's their favorite NPC in the entire dungeon. They keep coming back. They're like, "Hey, Gastrip, man, we brought you more supplies." They keep feeding him, and so there's all this great interaction. All of the really kind of standout NPCs are more than just a stat block. There's definitely, even from the short descriptions in the original text, you can extrapolate these personalities, and they become so much fun. And so part of the conversion and expanding on that is just led to so many fun encounters of that sort. Although I'm also a big fan of the other side of the freeze-dried room, which nearly TPK'd my players.
Well, Bob, just say it. Just say it.
There's essentially a trans-dimensional beast that is disguised as a door that is absorbing life and heat and energy. And so as the party is moving through this hallway and they're getting closer, it's got this weird siren song effect and it's drawing them in, and snow and frost is creating whiteout conditions, and all of a sudden they're fighting amongst themselves for survival against a door. And I love it.
That's great. Scott, what about you? What are some of your favorite encounters?
Well, I really like the giant gnome, but that's been taken. So I will say some of the NPCs as well. In going through the original material, and this was something I discovered that I told Chris about. That he goes, "Oh, that's kind of a cool fact." There are 2 NPCs on different levels, both named Grassus, and there's the backstory given for each of them. And in the original adventure, their backstories don't necessarily connect. But I'm like, there's a story why these 2 humans both have the same surname on different levels of the adventure and don't seem to have been kept away from each other. So we explored that a little bit more in the conversion. But just little things like that I kind of see as like gifts to the GM. Here's a little plot seed. I'm not going to fully develop it, but it's there in case you decide to expand on this a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I did like the fact too, I know you asked for 1, I'm giving you 2, but I like the fact that when we talked about the different factions, you initially encounter what we'll say are normal humans. And you may go through part of the dungeon thinking, okay, this is essentially populated like a city. There's people living underground. And then you get to a point and you say, oh, wait, it's not all people. There's other creatures, nasty creatures down here as well. And then you get to a point where you find essentially almost another city. And there's fake creatures down there. And you're like, oh, wait, there's yet another faction of creatures down here. I guess it's not just all the same monster. I have to decide who I'm going to ally with and who might be my friends. And it was a nice kind of twist, I thought, when you got down to the point of, I believe that's on level 3. And suddenly you discover, we said spoilers, okay, dryads and things like that down there. And you're like, oh, wait, they don't like monsters either. I may have found some potential allies if I play my cards right.
That's awesome. And nobody. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
I think it should bear mentioning that one of the inhabitants of. I mean, there's various interesting inhabitants, but let's just say death lives in the Caverns of Thracia, and I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that you're reading through this book, and if you ever hear anything about Thanatos, they don't mean anybody with a big gauntlet. They mean as in the Grecian Thanatos, as in death. So you might run across death while you're, aside from the usual ways you run across death in a dungeon, but you may actually encounter him or some of Thanatos's lingering, believers, which happened to me when I was playing Caverns of Thracia at Brendan's going away party a number of years ago. We saw a ceremony going on. We're like, aha, we have to be heroic, and we were first level, and we were on the first level of the dungeon too. But we promptly got our behinds handed to us because there was a 6% chance of the ceremony going on, and let's just say the high priest was substantially higher than us. So we got pummeled with all sorts of magic and fell into a big pit. So very interesting. Don't charge in and kill everything. That's what I'm just going to say.
That's always good advice.
Yep.
What about the Minotaur, or the Minotaur King, I should say? Nobody's mentioned them. Who wants to talk a little bit about the creature that made the cover art?
Okay, well, there is a Minotaur King who lives as where all Minotaur Kings do. Lives at the bottom of the dungeon. So so you have to take some effort to get down to it. And the Minotaur King is the big furry, I guess, the big hairy thing in charge of the kind of the bestial faction which is down there. And he is assisted by his flunkies, which consists of dog folk, and he also has some other bovine friends hanging around. And
his mom's there too.
Yeah.
His mom down there. And these characters which weren't given original names in the book, from what I remember. But Bob stepped up and named some of them. And I believe one is like Moonerva, or something along those lines.
I was trying to keep with the original tone, which wasn't incredibly serious at times.
So,
Again, see the giant gnome.
So basically the Minotaur King is living in basically the old original human king's little summer palace. So you get down there and you have to deal with him, and he's got dungeons. It's like you get through the dungeon, reach the palace, and the palace has dungeons. So and there may be a quick way out of those dungeons, or at least out of the fourth level, which involves one of my favorite words, tube. And something which looks like maybe Archimedes had designed and has kind of been forgotten about it. So if underwater subterranean UFO or escape capsules piques your interest, you definitely want to go down to the fourth level and see what the Minotaur King has in his back furry pocket. So.
All right. Anybody else want to add to favorite encounters or things they like about Thracia before we talk about other stuff in this project?
I'll add one more thing that I've really enjoyed. As I've been running the campaign playtest on the DCC side, one of my players, Chase Reinhardt, is the party's mapper. And he's been mapping and mapping and mapping and starting over and pounding his head on his desk and mapping and mapping. And it's been really fun to see, really, one, how close he's been able to get to the actual maps, but to see the level of care the players are putting in when they can sit down and look at the map and okay, it's not last session we ended in this room, so we're going to go down the hall. It's last session we ended here and we retreated back to camp. Now we've got 5 different ways in and 4 different areas we want to explore. What do we want to hit tonight? That sort of those options that my players are discovering not only keeps things fresh for them, but it keeps things fresh for me as a judge. And I've just been having a great time with it.
That's great. Scott, Chris, anything you guys want to add before we talk about all the other stuff in this project?
Good. There's a lot of other stuff to talk about.
I was going to say, I'm pretty excited to get to all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So one of our great privileges in having the ability to take a classic adventure and update it and modernize it is we can sometimes sort of push past the boundaries of where it stopped originally and add on new sublevels, add on new geography, things like that. And I guess we haven't mentioned this yet. Somebody in the chat mentioned it, but Caverns of Thracia was written originally by Janelle Jackways, who also authored Dark Tower way back when, and Goodman Games now owns these adventures. So as we expanded on Thracia, new ideas happened, and we wound up with, you can see it over my shoulder, Beneath the Isle of Serpents. You can see it over Scott's shoulder, Sacrificial Pyre of Thracia. There's several additional supplements that we were able to add on, new adventures, as well as new places. So maybe let's talk about Beneath the Isle of the Serpents, and maybe from there talk even a little bit about the archipelago and all that stuff. Maybe Bob, you want to jump in?
Sure. Beneath the Isle of Serpents, because there are some ties in the adventure running between Dark Tower and Caverns of Thracia, and the worshippers of Set certainly number with the Serpent Men. Beneath the Isle of Serpents deals with the concept of the revival of the Shadow Kingdom of the Serpent Men and introduces a new faction that isn't Set centric, and they're posing a threat to the larger area. They're trying to stir up old animosities between island kingdoms and villages and city states to bring the area to war so that they can conquer everything and make their presence known. And into this morass, we drop the PCs who really just know things are going bad. People are disappearing, and they're being pointed at this island. And so we have more ancient technology and ruins and structures to explore. It builds on the history of Thracia. As a matter of fact, I ran it as a side adventure for the Thracia group. They could go away and come back. And the villains are terrifying. By the time you get through the end, this is an adventure with true evil at its heart, and it lays plots that a judge can pick up for later of reintroducing the Serpent Men. Are they a power behind the throne sort of threat? Are they directly opposing the party? It gives you a lot of options moving forward, assuming the party survives.
And then, if I remember correctly, Sacrificial Pyre of Thracia was kind of a prequel. And Beneath the Isle of Serpents is being published as Dungeon Crawl Classics number 109 using the DCC rule set. Sacrificial Pyre is 5th edition fantasy using the 5e rule set. Tell us about Sacrificial Pyre of Thracia.
Sure. So Sacrificial Pyres of Thracia will work as a prequel, does not have to be a prequel, but the original Caverns of Thracia essentially took you to the edge of the ancient ruins of the city of Thracia, and you got to explore part of the city and the layers below it. Sacrificial Pyres of Thracia, I took the approach of what happens on the way there. So it explores the area around the city, assuming you are part of a party searching for this city and haven't quite found it yet. And you interact with some of the native people living in the jungles and the mountains and the desert surrounding Thracia, and come upon their interactions with the cult of the Dark One, or what is now the modern cult of Thanatos. And you essentially, in assisting the native folk to fight back the cult, they will eventually supply you with the information you need to make it to the ruins of Thracia.
And this is where you guys also expanded some of the geography. And this is where, and maybe Chris, you had alluded to stretch goals earlier. Let's talk about some of the things we've brainstormed as stretch goals and why we want to achieve them, because as you guys wrote more, there was so much more to cover.
Well, yeah, it was really, when you're presented with a project like this, the first thing that you start thinking of is where are those little bits and pieces where you can kind of expand out and kind of put your own little touch on it, kind of really flex your creative muscles and do some different things. So we really felt like the very first one that came to mind, and I think when I was originally talking to Scott about this project, I think I even said it, like, even before we got to like, yeah, you're going to convert the dungeon levels, but there's, like he said, the edge of the ruins. I believe in the original adventure, there's 5 encounter areas on the surface of the
on the western side of the city.
On the western side of the city. So we're like, well, boy, it'd be really great to have about 20 more of those areas and kind of just expand out and really kind of make it a little bit of a hex crawl, kind of, in addition to there's the dungeon, but there's that whole, you got to find the dungeon, and here's a little playground to play in. Not unlike the classic adventure Dwellers of the Forbidden City, where you get this huge, awesome jungle encroached city map, ruined city in the jungle, but you don't have it all detailed like a dungeon. You have one little area over here detailed, one little area over here detailed, and then all these other areas that the game master can just do whatever they want with, and then a couple of encounter tables and everything. So I think that really makes it kind of a lot more dynamic, much more of a sandbox, so that before you even get to the dungeon, you've got this whole little area that you could adventure in. And then also, you're going to run into things that are going to tie into the main dungeon. So I mean, that was obviously an important thing too. So and sounds like that's what we basically have with Sacrificial Pyre. You've got, here's your introduction to what's going on with the dark cult. Here's even more, and why you're probably going to want to care about it, once you get into the dungeons.
And that's where hopefully this project does well, and we clear a bunch of these stretch goals, because we can include, expansions of all sorts of regions around it, including poster maps. You guys at Theorize doing like a Starry Archipelago poster map, the ruins poster map. Like, there's a lot of room to make this even cooler than the original.
Yep, because that's just one part. That's just one of the stretch, or several of the stretch goals. We developed the whole rest of the continent, which we're calling the island of Thracia. So that is your classic hex crawl kind of, here's a bunch of areas on the map, and here's what all lives in these, and there's the different terrains and everything. And then we've got, Bob, I'll throw it right to you, the islands. When you think Greek civilization, the first thing that comes to your mind is
Archipelago.
There you go. And I mean, so we had to have one of those, right? And we had to put that in. Yeah. And that, again, same deal. It's a sandbox, but all these little different islands, and each island, I mean, you can have adventures on each of the islands in their own right. And we give you just a little bit of, just like the classic old ones where you get adventures where you just get that, a paragraph or so, just to kind of get you going on what's this one all about and everything. And then you're like, oh, I could definitely see setting a dungeon there, or, a ruined castle there, or something like that. So love that. So do you want to talk a little bit about the
Sure. The Starry Archipelago, which gets its name from an ancient disaster that split the sky asunder so that it looks up to alien stars. The archipelago is filled with like small city states and fishing communities. There is an ancient trio of wizards who have their research center there. There are navigational hazards. There is a maelstrom that is eternal. There are strange fogs and reefs. Yeah, someone in the chat even mentioned this really kind of scratches the Charles Schneer Harryhausen itch. And really, when you're thinking Thracia, you just have to kind of go there. And yes, you can find a Cyclops, right? And there are these things that you just have to have. And it's all kind of capped up in this fantasy Mediterranean Sea archipelago that is just, I mean, every location has potential for adventures and villains and connections to other adventures. So it's just a massive piece of fun. That's what I'm going to say. The archipelago is a massive piece of fun. It covers a lot of real estate for a reason.
And then, in addition to all those stretch goals in the two adventures, we'll have Monsters and Magic of Thracia, which will be a dual-statted, 5e DCC supplement with exactly as described, even more expansion of monsters and magic possibilities based on all the sort of brainstorming that came out of prepping all these things.
Yeah, and that book was created by Scott and Bob, so they were already in the Grecian zone when they were doing all this. So it was just a natural extension just to reach out to them and be like, "Hey, you got a bunch of monster concepts and magic concepts that we can put in this." And there was definitely not a problem with getting more ideas and everything. And we also didn't touch on, we gave a whole new dungeon level as well. So we have dungeon in the original, there was dungeon level 3A. So it just makes sense that we would add dungeon level 2A to that equation. So we slid that right in there. And it's amazing thing about that is when we first started doing this project, we were, kind of asking around some of the classic folks that have run this adventure on their own and everything. And the first person we always go to is, and everybody's going to know who this is, Taco John is the first person we reach out to. It's like, hey, John, it's like, give me your thumbnail sketch of what you think of Caverns of Thracia. And then, 45 minutes later, you walk away and he tells you all these cool things that he did when he was running it for his old first edition group, like back in the day. And he was the classic. He's like, oh yeah, there's the river going through. He goes, it would make so much sense to have a little sub level, like off the river, like over to the side. And, we kind of caught on that and we're like, yep, that's going to go in there because we definitely want to do another dungeon level. So yeah, so you get a whole nother, I'm trying to think, I think it's something like 30 some odd more encounter areas, I believe, in that dungeon level alone. So yes, more goodness. So we better clear that stretch goal.
Don't forget there was a missing room originally. And
Yes.
and since Thracia has levels, sub-levels, and room complexes,
Yep.
which are sub-levels, which really drive my mappers crazy, Scott created the missing room and its environments.
Yep. And it's a room and a sub areas and everything. Scott, do you want to talk about your
It's the
room
mysterious
102?
missing room 102.
Hmm.
In the original Caverns of Thracia, all the rooms were sequentially numbered, and the description for room 102 said the mysterious missing room. And if you looked at the maps, 102 was not on the map, but Janelle wrote in there, I may have accidentally misnumbered something on the map. So excuse me, I just wanted to fill in and keep you from looking for room 102. But if you actually look at the maps and you see where room 100, 101, 103, 104 are, you're like, there's enough room there. We could fit something in. Matter of fact, we could probably fit several somethings in there. So as Bob mentioned, there's a few areas that in the original adventure that were described as complexes because there's a bunch of related rooms. So there's a 53A, 53B, 53C. So room 102 became a suite of rooms, if you will, or a complex. So we added several additional encounter areas in one area on the map where it made sense to fit them in.
Yeah. And keep in mind, back in the late 70s, when the map was created, it was probably already processed, and I don't know what the printing process was back then. It was not just like firing it up on your computer and just like, oh, this is renumber it and you're done in like 2 minutes. It was probably going to be a major undertaking to redo that entire map and do it. So in that case, it was just easier to put that little disclaimer in. And then that nugget has existed to this day. And then the fact that we got to kind of like take that little nugget and run with it just makes it even cooler, in my opinion. So it's just a little nod to the original.
I want to leap off of something that Chris had said earlier about talking to John Hirschberger, Taco John, about his input on Caverns of Thracia and what the adventure meant to him. As we are wont to do here at Goodman Games, when we do this, they're usually accompanied with some essays. So for this one, we did the same thing. We asked some other people out there to contribute essays, and we have essays from Kelsey Dion. Perhaps you may know her from Shadow Dark. We have Kenneth Height is doing an essay for us. We have James Missler, who has been involved with the Judges Guild stuff, and he knows too. Bob and Scott have done one. So you're going to get some people's background and what this adventure means to them. Not only as an adventure, but Kelsey Dion talks about Janelle's work and how it meant to her. Kenneth Height talks about this basically introduced him to the idea of that start with Earth and build from there. So there's interesting background and design information that you might pick. You might learn something. Is what I'm saying. In addition to having an entertaining adventure. So.
That's great. That's a good reminder, Mike. And yet we're still not done. We have to talk about a couple of the other add-ons and then preview the actual project. But behind Chris there, you can see Hell Pits of Night Thing. And speaking of Janelle Jackways, this is her vampire adventure that she wrote way back when, originally for the RuneQuest rules. So we have had the privilege of updating this for both DCC and 5e. For this project, we're going to do, as you can see over Chris's head, a special Original Adventures Reincarnated treatment. For a cover treatment, we'll also release a traditional 5th edition fantasy cover and a DCC cover. And Chris, I believe we called this number 9.5. I remember right?
We love
OAR
our 0.5s. We love our.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have done 0.25. That might have been better.
Yeah.
An extra number.
Or like a third, 9 and a third, just a fraction.
0.3333.
Yeah. Well, and all the OAR volumes so far have been really thick hardcovers. This is going to be a slim adventure. So, for a retailer shelving them, it's a little awkward. So the OAR cover is going to be special for this crowdfunding. So if you want that cover, get it here. When it goes into stores, it'll have the FEF cover. But Hell Pits of Night Thing, we'll cover this briefly. But it's, I don't know who else to take this one, but it's basically a classic vampire adventure.
I'll take this one because I actually converted it. So at first I had to kind of get a PDF of the RuneQuest rules and kind of wrap my head around that, which was fun. And I remember RuneQuest from 30 years ago, but it was a nice little update to kind of get familiar with it. But essentially, it's the hell pits are these 3 natural sinkholes. So it's out in the middle of the wilderness and everything, and there's a nearby city, and people are going missing, and they all suspect something's going on in the what they call the hell pits, which are the sinkholes. And sure enough, a vampire has kind of showed up there and kind of set up shop and everything. So you basically go there, you run into a bunch of some natural creatures and tainted natural creatures, I would say, creatures that maybe look like they're natural, but they're not so much. RuneQuest had some really cool, evocative, they took a natural creature, but just kind of gave it an interesting kind of special effect. So we translated those over to the new rule systems and everything. And then it's a knock 'em down, drag 'em out fight with the vampire and its minions. Plus, there's a really neat hidden kind of tomb in the sinkhole too, so you can kind of explore that as well. So again, it's not a huge adventure, but we kind of gave it the treatment that we give everything else, and we convert it, and it was a lot of fun to do. So it's awesome to be able to offer that. We weren't sure how we were going to offer this. We were kind of like, it wasn't like big enough to do its own OAR, and but we wanted to do something, and I think we landed on something that was a really good idea, having the 2 alternate covers. So.
Yeah, and actually on that note, let's talk cover art just for a minute. The Hell Pits OAR cover features Janelle's original cover that she illustrated way back when, and the OAR version of Caverns of Thracia for 5e has the original Janelle illustration of the Minotaur King. The other covers, so Beneath the Isle of the Serpents is by San Julian, who everybody should have heard of. If you haven't, he helped define the look of Vampirella and Conan in the 70s, and it's just an amazing, amazing artist. And then the DCC hardcover version of Thracia is also features original art by, he did the Minotaur painting that everybody sees on the backgrounds there for Bob and Mike, but by San Julian. And then for Hell Pits and the Sacrificial Pyre, those are both illustrated. The sort of non-OAR version is by William McCausland, who you can see over Scott's shoulder and Chris's shoulder. There are portions of that art, and it's amazing. And there's a lot of other amazing artists involved too, the interiors and so on, but the covers turned out great. It is a great looking project. And then I think the last 2 aspects of the project, the dice. So I don't think we have illustrations of the dice here, but we'll show you on the project page. We work with a fantastic dice maker, Impact Games, and I gave him some inspirational sources, pictures of Greek pottery, like the old sort of green patina versions, as well as the terracotta, like sort of orangish brown versions, and the original Caverns of Thracia cover, that sky blue cover, and asked him to come up with some really cool dice that are evocative of these concepts, and he did. So you'll see on the crowdfunding pages, they're beautiful, beautiful dice. They feature basically really complicated techniques that cost more money. So if you've bought Goodman Games dice in the past, you'll see these are a little more expensive. It's because they mostly feature 2 or 3 different colors swirled together and or in a translucent resin, and we have mostly not done resin dice before. And there's flakes of foil embedded inside them. So 2 colors in particular, they kind of look good on the Kickstarter page, but if you see them in person, they were amazing because they reflect the sunlight as you kind of touch them and twirl them. And we just couldn't capture that in our photography as well as they resonate in real life. But trust me, they look amazing when you see them in real life, and the translucent one when you see the way it kind of sparkles in the sunlight. So there's awesome dice, all inspired by the sort of look and feel of either Greek elements or Thracia. Then the last thing is reprints. So we've had, actually I saw in the chat somebody mentioning they can't wait to get a hold of the first DCC annual. We've had a lot of products that have been out of print for quite some time. So we're going to reprint the DCC annual in both the original cover and Doug's really cool foil cover. And Sailors of the Starless Sea, we did a hardcover foil edition like 7 years ago, something like that. And a lot of people have asked for it since. So I know, Bob, it doesn't feel that long, but
No,
it really
doesn't.
is. Yeah, I know. So we're going to reprint that as well as a traditional hardcover with the color cover. And then a lot of the 5th edition fantasy skinny adventures and the DCC skinny adventures are out of print. They just keep on selling and fans have bought them up. So we're pulling together some hardcovers. So there's 3 tomes of adventure that have DCC adventures compiled, and then 2 compendiums of dungeon crawls, which have some of the 5e dungeon crawls compiled inside. So if you've missed any of these in the past or can't get a hold of the skinny adventure or whatever it might be, you'll get a chance to add them on here. I think that's, the t-shirt. We also have a Caverns of Thracia t-shirt. For Dark Tower, people love that Dark Tower t-shirt, and there was a lot of interest. So we did a version for Thracia too. I think that's it. Did I forget any other?
There's an early backer patch.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It even says that on your screen. Yeah, so if you back within the first 48 hours, you get this really cool patch. Thank you, Bob. Lean a little further, just a little further. Go further. Don't fall over. Yeah, there you go. Okay. It's a really cool patch. It's a something backer, Caverns of Thracia with that stylized Minotaur head. And that's only for folks who back in the first 48 hours.
And we should mention, I think we breathed over it, but the Compendium of Dungeon Crawls, in addition to the Tome of Adventure on this, and a certain limited edition cover of it, which is made from genuine Minotaur hide, right? That's
Genuine artificial Minotaur hide. We had to find a lot of
Genuine
artificial
hide.
Minotaurs. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my printer rep loves me because I always send her emails like, "Can you give me a book that looks like Minotaur hide?" She wrote back, she was like, "You mean like fur?" And I was like,
Look, let's be clear. It's kind of furred texture. It's not an actual fuzzy
right.
book. It's like
Not a fuzzy book.
Dead, you know.
No actual Minotaurs were harmed in the making of this book.
Only the cruelest of Nagas were slain for their hides.
That's right.
Yes. And a couple printer reps suffered cyclone damage. But yeah, so we'll show you this in the preview, but it's a really cool stylized Minotaur head sort of staring out at you, and it's going to be in debossed foil, either silver for one rule set or gold for the other. And the printer did come through. Tiffany, thank you. She has a textured leatherette that does look like kind of like mammalian fur, and we're going to be printing it on that. So it's a genuine artificial Minotaur hide cover with debossed foil, and that'll be the limited edition version of the Caverns of Thracia hardcovers you can get here. Sorry, Mike, you reminded me of something else. Back in the first 48 hours to get the patch, but back at all, and you'll get an art folio. The art of this, there's so many great illustrations for this project, but we picked 3 of them. The Isle of Serpents cover by San Julian, the DCC cover, which you can kind of see over Bob's shoulder there on the black background, which is also has the Minotaur painting by San Julian, and Janelle's original sort of blue cover. So those 3 art prints will be shipped with any print pledge for anybody who backs the crowdfunding in general. The crowdfunding will be on BackerKit, but anybody that backs that project, there's a reason to back now instead of holding out for later. You get the stretch goals, you get the art folio, you'll probably get the founding backer patch if you back early enough, and you'll have a discount on the final price. Every pledge level has at least a 10% discount, if not saving $50 or $100 off the retail price. What else did we forget? Anything else? There's so many things going on in this project.
We could look at the BackerKit page and see what.
Yeah, that might jog our memory.
Good thinking. Good thinking, Bob.
T-shirt. Did we mention the T-shirt?
T-shirt. I think we mentioned the T-shirt.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah. Elena, do you mind using your magic to show the BackerKit page? All right. So I also got to rearrange my windows here so I can, navigate myself. So everybody, you're looking hopefully at the top header and seeing the funny graphic that we're going to modify a little bit, but it tells you about the early bird special for the exclusive patch. And Elena, why don't we start with the pledge levels? Because we don't necessarily need the story page because we talked a lot already about all the stuff that the story page talks about. So if you go to the pledge level section, basically everybody likes to save a buck. And for us, there's a lot of benefits to having people pledge early in the crowdfunding. The shipping gets much more efficient if people buy in certain bundles and so on. So we're able to pass some of those savings on to you. So you'll see at the top of this page, there's 5 sort of featured bundles. If you pledge at any level, you save at least 10% off the MSRP. And actually, just to say it, like Dark Tower backers, a lot of people saved a lot more than 10% if they back some of our projects, because these silly writers wind up writing all this additional content. We're always like, oh, we should totally include that. So they wind up being much larger and much more spec by the time we print them, and we wind up having to charge more through distribution. So you'll probably save even more over the long haul by the time we assemble the finished product. But if you're 5-year DCC, the first bundle, which you see in the top left corner here, there's basically what I call the full Thracia collection of books, plus the dice or the merch. You'll get the hardcover, the 3 supplements, which sort of vary slightly by system. But either way, it's Hell Pits of Nightfang, and then Monsters of Magic of Thracia, and then either DCC 109 or 5th edition Fantasy Sacrificial Pyre of Thracia. Then you get the dice, and the dice sets for this project are being offered as either traditional polyhedrons or the DCC Funky 7. And you can choose to buy both of those to get a full dice chain. But if you buy the traditional polyhedrons or get the 5e bundle, you get the D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20, and it's 3d6 instead of just 1d6, and you get each of those four really cool designs. And if you buy the DCC bundle, you get the D3, D5, D7, D14, D16, D24, and D30. Mike, did I forget any? I think that's all of them.
No.
Okay.
Nailed it.
Although I think on the kind of the standard 7, there's a percentile die. In addition
Sorry,
to
percentile. Yes.
Yeah.
Good reminder. Yep. So you get all that hardcover, 3 books, 4 sets of dice, and the T-shirt, and you'll save $50 off the retail price, which is a pretty good deal. And you get several of the items that aren't going to be available everywhere, plus the patch, plus the art folio, etc. Mike, were you going to add something there?
Nope.
Okay. Cool. And then for those of you who really want everything in the project, the next 2 pledge levels are the all-in. The 5e all-in includes the compendiums of dungeon crawls as well, which compiles a lot of these out-of-print 5th edition fantasy adventures, as well as, Chris, if I remember correctly, there's 3 new adventures in there, right? That we wound up authoring and hadn't yet find their way into skinny module publication.
Yep. So there's 3 brand, and number 4, there are 3 brand new unpublished adventures.
And there you get the limited edition, which you can see in the graphic there. So at that level, you're getting the regular cover plus the limited edition cover, which turned out awesome. And you'll save $100 off the retail price for all this stuff that'll land at your doorstep and make you very happy in a couple months. And then on the DCC side, same basic concept. You get all this stuff, including the limited edition cover. This pledge level is more expensive than the 5e side because you get 3 hardcovers, the 3 hardcover tomes of adventure instead of the 2 compendiums of dungeon crawls. And the DCC dice sets are actually slightly more expensive than the traditional polyhedrons. This may come as a surprise, but there aren't that many molds lying around for 7-sided dice. So we tend to have to do a lot more molding. There's a lot more molding and tooling costs to make these special dice than to do the traditional polyhedrons. So they're slightly more expensive. Did I forget anything? Oh, and Doug did all new cover art or actually there's several new cover images that we didn't even cover yet, but Doug Kovacs did all new cover art for Tome of Adventure number 7, I believe it is. And then Stefan Pogue did all new cover art for Tome of Adventure number 5, which is the horror one. And number 6, the DCC holiday one, has Stefan's cover that I love from Marzio's Christmas Adventure from several years ago. So we're reusing that cover. There's just a lot of awesome cover art. Anybody in the chat have any questions or anything else we forget to cover? These are featured at the top because it's basically the best savings. And then for those of you who cross systems and want to get it all, and Elena, if you can scroll down to show the pledge level for the all in for all of it. This is a very expensive pledge level, but it's for those who truly want it all. You'll save $300 off the MSRP. And in addition to all the items covered in the previous pledge levels, it includes some of the reprints. So for example, the DCC annual in both the color cover and the foil edition, and Sailors on the Starless Sea in both the color hardcover and the foil hardcover edition. And then the full range of dice. You get the full dice chain, you get the 5e or traditional polyhedrons, as well as the DCC Funky 7.
Is it worth mentioning that we learned a lot on Purple Planet? We have added features that allow you to do some customization of your pledge level.
Yes.
For example, like, so if you really want like the limited edition cover, but you don't want to go all in on something, there are ways for you to upgrade your standard cover to the limited edition cover, by throwing a little extra money on it and stuff. So this way we don't have to, there's a little element of a la carte. So you don't have to worry about sending us an email like, well, I wanted to get this, but it's that option, and us having to create a whole new, stretch goal for it. It's like you can actually go in there and do what you want on your end. So.
Yeah, and actually, Elena, if you can click on the top menus there where it goes story, pledge levels, add-ons, community, click add-ons, and then scroll to close to the bottom. And everybody ignore the add-ons at the bottom that don't have any art yet. We're still finalizing some of the images. But the last one that has art is called the foil upgrade. And that, to Mike's point, if you pledge for one of the bundles and you really want the foil version of the cover instead of the color cover version, you can add this $20 foil upgrade. You can also just email us if you want to do that, which is how we did it on Purple Planet. But if it's easier to just add this add-on, that will then get you the upgrade to the foil edition.
DW Gable wants to know, when is this live?
Oh, great. Why, that's a wonderful question. It's almost like we set that up. So next Tuesday at, I believe it's 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, is where we're planning to take it live. So, and we'll be around chatting there for the launch show as well. So if you have questions once you dive in about the pledge levels, feel free to ask us real time on Twitch. But next Tuesday, mark your calendar. And if you want the founding backer patch, you got 48 hours from next Tuesday at 9 a.m. to pledge. And actually, this is a great reminder. You can follow the project now. Elena, do you mind dropping the following project link into the chat? If you follow the project now, basically the benefit is you get an email right as it launches saying it just launched. So in case you aren't the type to mark your calendar, you can be aware the moment it launches and go in and pledge quickly and get all the free stuff. Actually, let me find that link myself. If somebody can please drop that link in the chat, because I somehow managed to not log in, so I can't chat. Anyway, there you go. Thank you, Elena. Actually, and sorry, Mike, you made me think of something else too. Elena, if you can go back, we're on the add-ons tab right now. Go to the pledge levels tab. There's so much amazing art in this project. We have so much art, you can't like see it all really clearly because the things are so small because there's so many projects or so many products. But Elena, if you can just scroll down, once we get into the section on pledge levels where it's like just one book, then you can like fully see the cover art for each title. So maybe just show them the cover art for the OAR edition, which has that original blue Minotaur, or the limited edition cover that has the really cool stylized Minotaur head that Jason Edwards drew, or the DCC edition that has San Julian's Caverns of Thracia image with that Minotaur. Like, there's just so much cool art. So if you want to see all the amazing art, you can just scroll through this page or the add-ons page where you can see, really good illustrations or close-up illustrations of the covers for all the random tomes of adventure and compendiums of Dungeon Crawl and all the stuff. You can just add those on ad hoc, but also use this as basically an art gallery to check out all the amazing stuff.
So much awesomeness.
It is a lot. I mean, it's really cool having the chance to develop a classic property and just taking it even, in new directions. Oh, there's some like weird effect on what's going on my screen. I'm like ghosting out. I don't know what's going on here.
You're apparently on stealth mode now.
Yeah. I don't know what's happening here.
I think this is like Back to the Future. Something's going wrong and you're slowly getting erased from the timeline.
Yeah.
We all knew you had the One Ring, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you guys did an amazing job taking Caverns of Thracia and bringing it into modern 5e and DCC rule sets. And I think fans are going to be very happy with what they get. Not just the original content and the upgrades and the expansions, but all the additional content that you've added on. It's going to be amazing.
If you dug what we did with Dark Tower, I think you're going to like this one too. So,
oh yeah.
And I think it's worth pointing out, Dark Tower, which is a classic adventure, it's an adventure. It's a big adventure, but it's an adventure. Caverns of Thracia is more like a self-contained campaign. Mm-hmm. There is so much there that you can't just look at it as just another adventure, because it really isn't. With the way the level environments are different, each one of those is almost a module in and of itself. There's so much going on, and I mean, my playtest group has been playing for almost a year now. There's a lot of meat on these bones.
You easily get a year worth of play out of this. So,
and not get bored doing it, because it's not just another dungeon hall stretching off the distance.
Yeah, it takes you from levels 1 to 10 in 5e, if I remember correctly, and 1 to 5 in DCC. Remember that right?
Yeah.
Which is
pretty much, yeah.
Pretty far. Yeah. All right. Well, fans, if you have any questions, feel free to email us or drop us a line. There's so many ways to get in touch. Discord us, Facebook us, Instagram us, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks for everybody for watching, and we're looking forward to seeing you when this project goes live.
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Until then, thanks everybody.
All right.